Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very happy to be here with you, even if not in person. And I will talk today about monoterpens as geroprotectors, as they address inflammatory markers and quality of life issues. I have been trained as hematologist in Milan and have earned my PhD in Utrecht in hemorrheology, and have been active as a researcher in Paris at universities Paris Descartes and Paris 11 Sud. And thanks to the award for innovative research by the Ministry of France, I had the possibility to create my startup, AISA Therapeutics. AISA is an acronym meaning anti-inflammatory senescence actives. Going to more current subjects, COVID-19 has allowed us to reassess chronic diseases quite substantially. As you see in this cartoon that you may have noticed, common chronic diseases are in fact accelerating disabilities and even mortality. So something to do with aging. Markers to define senescence have been the start of the methodology we have followed. As Judith Campisi puts it in this wonderful conference in Paris about senescence in 2017, senescence markers are not specific. So indeed, our observations led us to define our own senescence markers, which substantially were overexpression of adhesion molecules, polymerization of actin cytoskeleton upon pro-inflammatory cytokines, so that the reverse expression of senescence markers turned out to be the inhibition of isoprenoidation of key proteins, leading to inhibition of adhesion molecules, and also eventually acting on the modulation of polymerization of actin cytoskeleton. This always inhibiting circulating inflammatory cytokines. Together with the Institut de Chimie des Substances Naturelles, we started a bio-guided selection and a research about 100 plant extracts and 2,000 molecules that we analyzed together with Pierre Potier, its director and president, another program, as you may know. And we identified anti-inflammatory. So in fact, in the case of plants, we identified these plants all were earned and collected as botanists of the Hanoi University. And this allowed us to file our first patent on cell degeneration mechanisms and reversibility. National Award for Innovative Research were awarded exactly for this patent. So next step, from the plant to the human studies, passing through in vitro studies, preclinical studies in rodents, gut, skin models, colitis, dermatitis, and stress models developed by etologists, functional observation batteries in 2007 and 2009, up to the Ristomet European study, which involved 140 patients in a project about healthy aging by nutrition. So you understand that the rare plant in Indochina were not an option. And so we found back, we had the chance to find back these monoterpens. Let's go through now the preliminary preclinical work that is of some interest also for the understanding of the mechanisms of the functioning of these monoterpens. In a colitis model, TNBS colitis model, we have noticed a dosage-dependent action of inhibition of pro-inflammatory cytokines, here TNF. And in fact, the mechanisms appears to be the inhibition of NF-kappa B. This has been published some years later because of patent issues, and same thing for the Ristomed study, in which these data were confirmed in humans. But also, not only, as you can see, interleukin-6 were quite inhibited, but fibrinogen, today a star because of COVID, were quite implicated in this addressing inflammation. But another great source of systemic inflammation is leaky gut. And you may be familiar or not with the many triggering, causing factors that are implicating intestinal damage. We will concentrate on cortisol as response to stress, but the others are of great interest as well, such as pregnancy or menopause. Finally, they will lead progressively from malabsorption to autoimmune diseases and then to generalized inflammation. We are talking since years about silent inflammation. And finally, blood-brain barrier breach will lead to neuroinflammation. The symptoms of neuroinflammation will mimic aging, but they will have nothing to do with aging. They are just based on substantial barrier dysfunction. So stress changes immune reactions, generating this sickness disease, which is a collective name for loss of memory, anxiety, refusal to meet social events, obsessional thoughts, difficulty to concentrate, depression, chronic fatigue syndrome and burnout, sleeplessness, loss of interest, finally, obsessional neurosis. So monoterpens indeed modulate cytokines, but not only, they also repair gut barrier. And we have shown this together with the colleagues of the Charité in Berlin, who were participating into the Ristomed study in an enterocyte electromechanic model quite nicely. So altogether, for the moment, gut barrier integrity is really the previous step to undergo if you do an inflammation treatment. So gut barrier dysfunction leads to systemic inflammation, but is reversible by epigenetic, microbiome-driven probably, modifications, emphasizing the role of small molecules contained in nutrient components, such as the new geroprotectors we are talking about. So the protagonists of this loop are obviously the stress, the unbearable stress, the one you can't resolve by your own strategies, eliciting glucocorticoid secretion that is entering in a vicious cycle, transforming from anti-inflammatory device into a pro-inflammatory device because of gut barrier leakage. And this can be counteracted through short-chain fatty acid microbiota strains that are in turn stimulated to do so by psychobiotics, mostly prebiotics, and some are even convinced that probiotics might help. Now, monoterpens as modulators of microbiota have been shown in our study to reverse the ratio between Clostridium in Bifidobacteria. It is interesting to note that in fact, probiotics are doing the contrary. So one of the avenues I would like to go is to look a little bit closer to this mechanism. Markers of diabetes, thrombosis, and cardiovascular syndrome are obviously very important. And the hallmarks of aging are lying in these cardiovascular markers. Anti-inflammation results, though, in mood modulation. But mood modulation is linked, in fact, here we see the mood modulation in humans on the right side, in particular in women, and in rodents, in these fantastic studies we have performed with the etologists. I could talk more about this, but maybe another time. As I said, mood is highly influenced by metabolic issues. And although this has been documented since Aristotle, this is still a thing we should link in a study: insulin resistance and mood alteration. We have documented it by these psychiatric statistic questionnaires. A Japanese study and patent filed on demand of the Nestlé Foundation showed that dopamine, which declines with age, as you all know, was rising tremendously when limonene was injected in the peritoneum of these mice in this study. And in fact, changing completely their behavior. So monoterpens seem to address the gut-brain axis. This is a cartoon of an article that is more of a review I have published last year. Each ongoing stress transduces into an increase of inflammation, starting at the level of the gut barrier dysfunction, generalizing then to the whole body and mimicking the mood disorders that are not real mood disorders, that are just gut dysfunction. Particularly striking was the cytokine storm to me, because, as Jamie Garfield put it from the Temple University in New York, the fact is that the real morbidity and mortality of this disease is probably driven by this out of proportion inflammatory response to the virus. Well, what does this mean? This means that there is already a terrible inflammation going on in the person who will come out with symptoms of COVID-19. So coming back to our first senescence anti-aging relevance scheme, AISA can control the SASP phenotype of the senescent cell. Is this relevant for aging? We don't know, but one aspect of anti-aging is undeniably addressed, and that is the one on the skin. Because if you have an effect like this, after 2 months, apparently you address an aging issue. And wound healing without angiogenesis is exactly part of these mechanisms. We have to still mechanistically document better. But in this study that has been published in 2014, we documented at least this concomitance of cytokine inhibition and angiogenesis, and also scar formation inhibition. So tissue repair in a model of psoriasis and atopic dermatitis was the first and consequent step to go to humans. Here we have the effect of the limonene and its metabolite pyrrolic alcohol in a TPA model. Monoterpens in human intermediate psoriasis in collaboration with the Sapienza University were really a striking result, worth any attention, because they also corresponded to an incredible amelioration, here the last square cartoon, of the quality of life. So wrapping it all together, if terpenoids are potential geroprotectors, as documented by Alexei Moskalev in his nice review, Certainly, the halt of the cycle of chronic inflammation is contributing to this. And the reinforcement of gut and skin barriers has a little bit been our contribution, as well as the improvement of metabolic parameters, skin repair, and also the mood component that so much contributes to the quality of life. Not last but least, not only in terms of anxiety and depression modulation, but this enhance of concentration that could in fact interest very much also fit people. Perspectives. When you look at the Hangzhou library, I never had the chance personally, but I really would dare to see how it is live. You have the impression you are within the DNA. And do monoterpens modulate aging markers via systemic biomarkers addressing or non-molecular biomarkers addressing? All this has been shown peripherally, functionally, and should now more mechanistically be addressed. In particular, monoterpens modulating DNA methylation could be a way, acting as HDAC inhibitors. This would be very interesting. Why? Because monoterpens in the dosage we have characterized as functional are absolutely not toxic, whereas HDHC inhibitors just are not an option as drug because of their high toxicity. So with Jackie Han, we discussed a lot about a possible model to address an evaluation of these monoterpens, and hopefully I will have the chance to meet her in Beijing next year and start the whole discussion we had at Eric Gilson's lab in 2019-18 during the great ICAD meeting. To finish with Metchnikoff's legacy, who at the end of his life wrote an essay on optimisms after 3 suicide attempts. He was studying the cause of human longevity, but not in the sense to understand how to prolong life further, but to understand how it was possible that we live so long. And he addressed his whole final essential vision on the contribution of the intestinal flora in the precise cause of this principal longevity. So here are my credits and questions. People with whom I have traveled through all these problematics. And here you have my emails and websites and Twitters, and you can ask me all the questions you can't live ask me now, because probably it is too complex, but this doesn't avoid the contact. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will stop the meeting. So here we are.